Hi, this is David, and I'm going to be doing our overview of week 3 or chapter 3 of the storybook in 360 seconds or less. So let's dive in. So in chapter 3 of the storybook, we're covering the content from Genesis chapter 37 through Genesis chapter 50, which most of us would look at or know or recognize as the life story of Joseph. And yet what we're going to find is that the life story of Joseph isn't this just isolated narrative. It's not this story that you can pull out of its context, which is what we tend to do. And there's great moral lessons and great moral teachings if you just, pull it right up out of the context. You can talk about the purity of Joseph and his faithfulness and forgiveness and reconciliation, how Joseph was somehow in the midst of all of these circumstances of betrayal and hatred by his family and being falsely accused. He's just constantly being kicked, and somehow he was able to rise above his circumstances. And yet what we find is that this narrative, that this story isn't just an isolated event. It is part of what starts all the way back in the beginning when God promises the seed of a woman will come and rescue. And so the narrative, the author, God himself is weaving through all of these stories, this seed, and he's following the line of this seed. And in chapter 37, verses 1 through 2, we read that this account isn't actually about Joseph. Right? It's actually about the preservation of the family line of Jacob. It says that Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. And this content, this narrative is the history of, or the account of, or the generations of Jacob himself. So if we zoom out to get kind of a bird's eye view, we zoom out and look at the whole thing as a whole, we see that this narrative, that this life of Joseph is about protecting or preserving a remnant, or protecting or preserving the family of Jacob. So Joseph is an individual that's used by God as a rescuer, as a deliverer, to bring a great deliverance in the family line of Jacob, which is actually what Joseph himself realized in chapter 45 of the narrative. It says that God sent me, Joseph is talking, before you to preserve you a remnant on earth, to keep alive for you many survivors, or to work a great deliverance. So it wasn't you who sent me here, brothers, but God himself. So Joseph realized that his life is used by God to preserve a remnant, or to work this great deliverance, keeping alive the seed, or the family of the seed, because that seed that was promised back in Genesis is promised to us to come through the line of Abraham. And then the promise gets narrower and narrower and narrower. So it's not through just the line of Abraham, but it's through the line of Isaac and through the line of Jacob. And ultimately we know that it's through the line of Judah, right? God is narrowing down the promises of where this seed is going to come from. And in his foresight and in his sovereignty, he sees that there's this famine coming, and that famine is going to be severe. Right? It's going to wipe out the line of Jacob. And if the line of Jacob is wiped out, then ultimately there's no seed of the woman, because it's promised to us to come through the line of Jacob. So God, in his foresight and his sovereignty, is working in and through real time and real space to bring about a real deliverance of the family of Jacob, in and through a rescuer or a deliverer named Joseph. And so we have what is just this wonderful picture of Jesus Christ. Because the scripture has two different layers, right? The real time and real space and real men and real problems, real history, right? That God is working in and through. And then there's all the second layer, that while he's working in real time and real space, he's also painting a picture for us of the ultimate Messiah, the ultimate rescue, the ultimate Messiah, Jesus Christ. And so there's just this wonderful, incredible masterpiece that God is revealing to us here in the life and person of Joseph. And you have these two layers of scripture that paint for us two different deliverances, right? One in real time and real space, and one that's ultimately fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And if you read the life of Joseph, you can't help but see the final and great rescue and the final and great person of Jesus. They're both the favored, beloved sons of their father. Joseph and Jesus are both betrayed by their own family. They're not recognized by their family. They're cast aside. They're despised, rejected, falsely accused. Their robes are stripped from them. They're dipped in blood. Yet both Jesus and Joseph are restored to the right hand of power. They're raised from the pit to life. They rescue nations. They provide a great deliverance of nations, and they open up the storehouses of abundance and of provision to any and to all who come before them and draw near and bow the knee. So Jesus is ultimately the fulfillment of the life of Joseph. He brings about the complete and final forgiveness, the complete and final reconciliation, and the complete and final removal of the curse. So God is working to bring about a great deliverance through Joseph, both preserving the family line of Jacob and ultimately through the life of Jesus Christ. So that about does it in 360 seconds. I hope you'll jump in and join us for chapter 4 of the story as we continue to get to know God through his story.